Hello, everyone. This is Matt Fuller, COO of Jason's Heart here in fine old freezing cold Lincoln, Nebraska today. Welcome to our podcast. We've got some exciting things happening here today. We've got a fantastic visitor that I'd like to introduce here in a second. So, without further ado, give me just a sec here, and I'm going to bring on a couple individuals who I'll introduce to you here. And I think we've got them on here. Okay, we have a couple special guests. We've got our fantastically talented Jason. Oh, and by the way, really quick, I have to apologize to our audience because apparently I thought Jason was related to Adam Levine, the musician, but it's actually Levine. So I called you Levine last time or Levine last time. Like maybe you have millions and I didn't know. So I apologize. I wanted to clarify that with everyone that it's Levine. So
no worries, sir.
so anyway, moving on. I had to correct that. So Jason is our executive director, as you know, and he has a really awesome and special guest today, Mr. Randy Thurber, with the task program here in Lincoln. So I'm going to kind of let you gentlemen run with it here for a second, and let's meet Randy. I'm excited.
Well, welcome for coming here, Randy.
Oh, you're welcome.
You work with TASK program,
Yes.
which stands for Targeted Adult Services Coordination.
Correct.
Could you kind of explain what TASK does a little bit?
TASK was originally started back in 2002. I was the original case manager. It was a grant-funded program. The state funneled money down to, at the time, Houses of Hope and Region 5 systems. And the project was actually called the High Utilizer Project. What that meant was these were some targeted individuals who highly utilized the emergency room, detox, the jail, crisis center. Many of you have heard the term revolving door. These were people that would pass through those systems using up emergency services, sometimes homeless or near homeless, generally a combination of mental health and substance abuse problems, people with a longstanding history of being just repeatedly, one individual repeatedly jailed, probably at least as a guess back then 90 times in a year. So the intent of the project was to intervene with these individuals and provide some case management. Some individuals had services before, so the goal was to reconnect them with services. And the caseload size was only 10 because of the high level of need these individuals had and the multiple diagnoses. And so through that initial project, we were able to demonstrate that the intervention did work, and that we had individuals that would show a marked decrease in all those services. The one individual that stood out the most was an individual who was homeless, and we worked collaboratively with that individual, with the hospital when he was there, and also with Lincoln Police Department, where this individual was really well known. We also worked with the bridge at that time, and I was able to establish rapport with this individual, and working with him, we were able to get him housed, but also when that didn't work, he was ready for treatment finally. And basically we're able to partner with the bridge at that time and get him into treatment. And the outcome was much better. In fact, one of my coworkers, her husband was a police officer, and they asked what happened to so-and-so because they hadn't seen him in a long time. They thought maybe he had passed away. So this individual is very well known to the police department, I think the community at large. And so that was one good example of how this type of case management and the collaboration pretty much with the whole community was able to work for that person. And in
Yeah.
this case, the village did help to get this person the help they needed.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, one thing I was going to say as well is, I know last week, Jason, we talked about just a little bit about our program in the apprenticeship, and I just wanted to line out for our listeners, what we are doing with talking to Randy and talking about task is, I guess for me at a high level, is what are some of the programs? Obviously, this is one of them for Lincoln, but what are the benefits of these types of programs? And I guess helping our listeners understand why these programs are so important, kind of like what Randy is sharing with us right now. But I wanted to take a second, go back and just talk about why we are having this conversation about task and some of the things we're trying to do and the importance of these programs to our communities and why it is so important that people get involved and soar with us, right? They help spread the word, help share these programs. So yeah, I just wanted to take a second and sort of line that out for listeners, like what we're talking about and the importance of it. So yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. I just wanted to share that.
That's fine. That's fine. So, Randy, you've been in this behavioral health industry for 36 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
What drove you to become a case manager and work in this field, if I may ask?
Well, originally, I just kind of fell into it, actually. I originally started working with people with developmental disabilities, and someone I was studying with at UNL said, "Hey, I work for Lomar. You should apply there after you graduate." So that's how I got started. And I was in that field probably 15 years, and then I switched into the high utilizer project, which we discussed earlier, which was a big switch for me. But I'm also a recovering alcoholic, and I have a mental health diagnosis of my own. And I wanted to kind of, I guess, expand my professional horizon, so to speak, and see if what I'd learned in AA could be translated to other um, individuals. So it was quite a big risk for me at the time. It was grant funded and kind of delving into an area I knew some about, but not a lot. And so the other reason I got into I guess instead of just falling into, the reason I got into it is sometimes the reason a lot of people in human services get into it is because not all, but some of us get into it because we have some of our own things that we've fought through and survived and grown from, and we wanted to share that with other people.
Yeah.
And so for me, as part of my personal journey is I have a unique, I guess, set of life experiences that make me well suited for case management. I grew up in an alcoholic abusive home. We were removed from the home when I was maybe 10. I actually became a ward of the state. Now, I was lucky in that I was able to stay with family. I wasn't part of the foster care system. However, I stayed with my sister, and then I lived with the family that kind of took care of us when we were still living with our father. And then I lived with another sister. So I kind of got passed around the family, and that had some long-lasting effects for me also. Fast forward, I graduated college with a 3.4 average. Now, if I'd have been sober most of that time, I probably would have done better, but I wasn't.
True.
However, June 1st, 1990, I stopped drinking. Like a lot of people, sometimes the law gets involved and says, hey, it might be a good idea you go to treatment. I did that back at Independence Center when they still had the old building standing. And I went to outpatient, but I probably should have been inpatient, but I just started a different job, and I was really afraid that if I went inpatient like that, they might just let me go. So I was able to stay sober. I'm still sober to this day, um, and worked through a lot of my own trauma issues from my childhood, and um, have off and on over the years seen therapists, and I take medication for my depression. Um, the newest thing for me, a few years ago, I started having a lot of physical body symptoms, and couldn't really get diagnosed here. Um, it was a very scary time for me because um, didn't know what was wrong with me. It was affecting my whole body. They were doing all sorts of tests on me for autoimmune things and just all sorts of things. And I finally had to go to the Mayo Clinic to get diagnosed with fibromyalgia. The reason I share that is fibromyalgia can be caused by several different things, but one of the biggest causes they found at the Mayo Clinic is persistent childhood trauma. And so what that does is my brain is always in fight or flight. And so when you've got adrenaline coursing through your veins, even when you sleep, it makes for some interesting symptoms. I do have what they call brain fog at times. My body always aches, and there are times where it will really hurt. I also have chronic fatigue from it because I don't sleep as well as normal people do. So I'm facing that challenge, and the reason I again mention is because it's directly related to the trauma of my childhood, and so it's been another challenge I've had to deal with, and I'm not overcoming. I'm just dealing with it, just like my alcoholism. I have to deal with it every day, and my depression, and I do the best I can in life, and luckily for me, I have a very supportive, very supportive wife, and other friends who do understand. And so that's kind of been my journey. I've worked in this field for 36 years and done a wide variety of positions, and worked in Iowa for a while also. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
Nope, you did. And
okay.
first of all, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
First of all, that's very hard thing to do, but it's something that you have done because you've been going through this journey and working with the clients you have. You are able to form those good relationships with them right away because of some of the things that you have experienced.
Exactly.
And so thank you for, being in this field and helping out the people that you have helped during their time.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories of success, that you have seen in the last 36 years? Anything that just kind of jumps out?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think probably when I worked in Iowa, probably some of my big success there was actually running a rehab group, and basically we were working with people with mental retardation and mental illness. And some of the things I had learned working for Houses of Hope the first time and the High Utilizer Project, I integrated into this into this program. And first and foremost is this is a safe place. And what made me unique to know that was so important is because most of the people, this is a new thing in human services, probably the last 15 years or so, recognizing the effects of trauma. And most of the people that are going to be coming into your office, a human service agency, whatever, have some level of trauma that does still affect them. And so the first thing we had to make sure it was a safe place. The second thing I did was I got feedback from the clients that were coming there and the ones that came in. What do you want this to look like? What do you think? I wanted their buy-in because one number one reason I'd never done anything like this before, so I wanted some guidance from them.
Sure.
And the other thing I did was also the clients that were coming there all the time, asking them about what works with this individual, or what works for you, what didn't work before, what do you want this to look like? And that I discovered was a unique approach. I was actually just talking to my wife this morning about this. One of the other staff members at agency came to me and said, "What are you doing that's so different?" And I explained to her, and she said, "Oh, I would have just made them a list of chores that they could have done, and they could have come here every day and done that." And that's kind of what that's what they thought. But I envision this place, because of my experiences in life and in work,
Yep.
as a place to grow. And that's one of the reasons they gave me the position, because I had a vision for how are we going to make this more of a rehab, a learning thing. And so it did grow to the point where I actually had to have another staff person working with me, to the point where the director wanted staff to shadow how I interact with people. And I'm not doing that to toot my horn. I'm doing that because the other side of all the stuff I've been through is, as Jason just said, when you've been through these things and you've grown from them yourself, you recognize in other people and can help them grow through it. And that's the biggest thing that's kept me in human services all these years, is that I used to call it, you get to see the light bulb come on sometimes. So that's one big success. The other big success I already mentioned was the individual was in jail all the time, constant police contact, just pretty much, a general nuisance to Lincoln. And we took that person in and worked with him and got his trust, and basically, you started to see a different side of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you guys, I think, are going to be doing here is be working really closely with people and working on some of those, what I call core issues. So in other words, this person's got a lot of stuff they're bringing that might be baggage that could be a hindrance to doing whatever. And you guys are going to look at that and say, okay, let's get through this stuff a little bit too, and let's make this a safe place, a learning place, a place where you can grow, and we're going to support you through this.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I was done. But go ahead.
No, that's okay. One question that I thought of too, that you kind of mentioned it earlier when we were chatting, just about the initial conversations we were having, and you got really excited when we started talking about this program. And I guess it's sort of a two-part question. One is, what about what we were doing seemed different and exciting to you? And then maybe taking that into exploring what barriers you see people who go through a substance use treatment program, a barrier, whatever in their life, what are some of the biggest challenges they face when they re-enter the workforce? So I guess if you want to start with one, whatever works for you.
Well, I think what excited me about what you guys are going to do is, this isn't often recognized even in human services, is recognizing that we're going to work on this person's self-esteem and issues, and then we're going to train them on a new job. And recognizing that that's going to be part of the training and the journey for this person and for you. And so that's why I got excited about all that.
Sure.
Because to be honest with you, that's the technique I've used for many years with people. And I've seen it work, and sometimes it doesn't, because the person's not ready. But I can guarantee you'll always be ahead when you get to know someone and let them know they're valued, and let them know that you may not understand their struggle, but you validate it. Those are things that those are very important. Now, when you have people who are coming out of substance abuse treatment programs, I think one of the things that, they're going to have a challenge with, what are the legal issues they have coming out yet? I don't know if substance abuse treatment facilities are doing anything kind of work on self-esteem while they're there. I hope they are, because just because someone gets out of treatment doesn't mean it's all going to be rosy. It means this is where the real work's going to start. And I think treatment centers do a really good job of giving people the tools to stay sober. One of the challenges I have seen, and this is just based on my personal experience, is that a lot of folks who have a substance use problem have some type of underlying mental health problem. Not always, but at least you can say depression and anxiety is very common in alcoholics and addicts. And so that issue may or may not be addressed effectively. I think it probably is though these days, because you have a real been a real movement the last 20 or 30 years of making sure that we're treating both disorders.
Yeah.
When the person gets out, though, one of the things I've found, just in AA in general, is people don't like to talk about trauma or any kind of mental health diagnosis. You do the steps and you'll be fine. Well, I like to think as human beings we're a little more complicated than that. And so I think sometimes that's a barrier for people, but I think in employment, they're probably not going to be able to go back to the old job, or maybe they haven't been employed for a long time because they've been pretty chronic and severe in whatever is going on with them. Those are some things. Housing. Now, Houses of Hope does do a good job of really halfway houses. Those are very important. Their family relationships may be strained, but those are some of the challenges I see, and those are big challenges.
Yeah.
But I do know that with some of the work we're doing with Task is that they have a worker at the bridge who's assisting with these things. With Task, we have if they're referred to us, we have a kind of a continuum of care, whether it be just the few months with Lutheran Family, or more intensive with our program with the intensive case management model. And we also have follow along too. Now, those are for the group people we have in our program. Now, the other folks that aren't in any of these services, they can certainly, if they're referred, get into them. But I think the biggest struggle is, how am I going to maintain this when I get out?
Yeah.
That little treatment high is a real thing. And for me, when I went to outpatient treatment when I first got out, it's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Exactly.
So those are some of the challenges I see, but I have not worked directly in the substance abuse field, more the mental health field. I'm just kind of venturing some guesses here. And I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. I think you were going to say something too, Jason. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, going back to how the TASK program has grown. I know a lot of the people who work down there because I do work with them.
Yes.
In my sister company here, and you said they're a collaboration. Houses of Hope is who you're under, but then you also work with, you said Blue Valley Health, Lutheran Family Services, Bridge Behavioral Health.
Yep.
Were there any other agencies that you kind of work under or work with in this task area?
No, those are the only ones. Okay. And I've only been back this time for like 6 or 7 weeks. So I think I'm correct when I say those are the only ones.
No worries. But it's a program that one company started, but then had all these other agencies together. So they're all working together for the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's something that, I mentioned this before, Lincoln is amazing when it comes to that community support, and with the nonprofits and the agencies, they do work so much. They're so intertwined.
Yes.
So that's helps out in that support area.
Yes.
There is a lot of support for people out there, whether they're a dual diagnosis or they are in the substance abuse or in the mental health diagnosis, but there is a lot of support out there.
Yeah. Lincoln's a really unique community. I noticed that when I first started with Houses of Hope and the grant funded project. Lincoln's a town where you won't go hungry. People will do the darndest to house you, get you into treatment, whatever it is, but there really is a real sense of community when it comes to that. And that's the thing that kind of amazed me. Coming from the developmental disabilities field into that, developmental disabilities has a lot more funding. And, we talked earlier about stigma. If you're developmentally disabled, there's some stigma with that, but that's much more accepted than if I'm, a really bad bipolar individual who drinks a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's one of the things I noticed is like, wow, if we had the same funding level for these folks, we could really do some great things. Unfortunately, the politicians don't feel the same way. So um, um, if I had to change anything in mental health and the substance abuse field, it would be the level of funding, because there are some people that just really need a lot of help, and first time isn't a charm usually.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't mean we should give up on them, but we really are um, working at a deficit as far as the amount of funding that's being allocated. I mean, I can for sure in Nebraska. I don't know about other states, but it's woefully inadequate.
Well, and maybe, as we're having this conversation, we could talk about, I know we've spoken about it, kind of looking at the 2 to 3 big issues that programs, maybe Jason's hard task, whatever it might be, what are 2 or 3 of those big issues that we face right now? I mean, I know for us personally, looking at avenues to get our public involved to support programs like this versus grants and other things, it oftentimes makes it so we can serve more and serve well versus constantly doing the minutia of getting that money. So I don't want to answer the question. I guess maybe we talk for a second about some of the barriers and challenges that, what those might be for programs like Task and Jason's Heart.
Well, like I said, first and foremost, probably be funding. One of the things we talked about earlier is when you've got all these the government funding different things, and a lot of times they dictate kind of what that service will look like. And one of the things I've noticed in human services in general in the last number of years is the increased amount of paperwork to kind of justify you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. For me, where that ends up being a problem is it takes away from the time of actually doing the work that's important, and that's working with the individual.
Yeah.
And getting those supports in place and getting them to have some of the things that the internal things we've talked about, trying to help them build some confidence, some self-esteem. And again, the reason why I hit on that again is I had some epiphanies over the years of human services, and one of them was we bring these people into service, and we don't really check to see where they're at, if they want to, how their confidence is in even participating. And so that's another reason I got excited by what you guys are doing, is because that is probably the biggest thing. Because no matter what program or service we put in place, if we haven't kind of judged where they're at, self-esteem, confidence-wise, then we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. I mean, we can have the greatest program in the world, but if they don't feel like they can do it, or they're not worthy of the help, then it doesn't matter what we put in place. So that's one of the reasons I was excited about that. Not so excited about the increasing amount of paperwork that the government seems to want, and the agencies have to provide and say in order to say, yes, look what we're doing.
We've certainly, I think, experienced, how do we go about making it so we help the most people, and trying to avoid maybe, I guess, funding or whatever, creating our own barriers and more barriers, and instead of trying to make something where we can help the most amount of people in the most efficient way. I don't know. One thing I heard, and you just mentioned it, that I think is always our intention. And I guess, I didn't think about it as much until as of late, but just if you go to a program, or you go into custody, or you go into a substance use program, it's always that what next when you get out. I can't say I know what that feels like. I can empathize with it, but I certainly can understand and appreciate that it is a big challenge. It's got to be terrifying So having something like this that we're talking about with Jason's Heart and having that what next. And then I think we have been pretty diligent about the what next for the what next, right? The what next is us. And hopefully the what next after that is the partnerships with local employers so that we can find alignment for them to move seamlessly right into that next phase for them, for someone, anyone.
Exactly. That's something that, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
when you're out of a treatment or even like incarceration, what do you do next? What's your next step? Housing, food, job, all that stressors. And that's where a lot of people would probably succumb just from the initial. Would you not agree?
Yeah, because the struggle then is to meet basic needs, and if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically those are the main things. Safety and security are the first things that need to be met for any of us to evolve,
Yeah.
spiritually or emotionally, whatever you want to call it. And so when you've already got an individual who's um, suffering from a mental illness or major drug addiction or both, there's reasons why they're the way they are. No one grows up and say, I'd love to be a drug addict and spend a lot of time in prison and jail and on the streets.
Right.
Um, so you've got someone who's coming out who's, I guess, at a distinct disadvantage of
Mhm.
the situation. And that's where your agencies come in, and other people in the community. I've seen people in the community do just wonders for people just being their friend.
Yeah.
Um, so it's overwhelming to them. So that's where if they hook up with an agency, and kind of do what needs to be done, then there's hope. Um, Sometimes people get impatient, or sometimes people are just so um, down or just don't trust the system, period, that they won't engage at all. And we have that happen.
Yeah.
Um, but it's definitely, that's kind of where the first safety net is, the community and also the agencies involved. And there's a lot of good agencies in town that are doing a lot of good work.
Mhm.
Um, so basically, it's a challenge. I mean, I've never been homeless. I have a good friend of mine that was homeless, and now he's a sociology professor. So,
Oh,
there's hope, right?
There is. And
um,
a lot of that hope does come from, like you said, we have the agencies, but just people in the community.
mhm,
Like you said, just being nice to people. You never know when a smile may help someone throughout a bad day.
right.
There's so many ways that people in our community and people who are listening right now can get involved. They can volunteer for different agencies, shelters,
Mhm,
food banks. Financially, they can donate to different places. Jason's Hearts or jasonsheart.org,
mhm,
housesofhope.com
mhm,
is the place that works with the task program.
mhm.
There are so many different places that need help, that could use help, and there's a lot of people out there that want to help.
Yeah.
Um, so, I suggest to anyone out there listening, if you want to help with someone or something that is dear to your heart,
Mhm.
reach out to any one of these agencies.
Yeah.
We will sit there and figure out where you can help the best and get you to those people, so that way the people who are going through those services have that support that you speak of.
And the other agencies, Lutheran Family Services has a place where you can donate. The Bridge, even if you can't donate financially, clothing, they always need clothing down there. I'm sure the other treatment centers need the same. Um, just, even volunteering, um, you know, um, Blue Valley Mental Health also does a lot of good work, and not just in Lincoln, but throughout the region.
yeah. Yeah, they do.
Then, those monies donated to any of those agencies will have an impact. Um, and that's one way to do it. But another way is also just, I think, if there's anybody in your life that you think can use a friend or be a mentor to, do it. It's not just to help them, but you'll get a lot out of it too. Um, it just amazes me that over the years, just people remember your kind words or your concerns. I
Yeah.
can give you an example of that. When I worked for the mental health center, and I had a client, and I kept saying to him, hey, if you keep doing this, it's not going to end up well for you. And that's pretty much what I said. And so I knew he listened to my words, because he came into the office and his mom was upset and he was upset. But he said something that was really telling to me. And his mom was saying, well, it's my fault that this happened. And he goes, no, it's not, Mom. I made the bad choice. Now that sounds like an unusual story to tell, but he was listening. And even I still run into clients over the years out on the street who will come up and talk to me because of those kind words or those concerns. And so anybody can offer that to anybody at any time in their life. And you'd be surprised how much that helps that person. They might always tell you, but I can guarantee you, if they're struggling with something like some of our folks struggle with, mental health, substance abuse, or trauma, whatever it is, that makes a big difference. And I was fortunate enough to have people in my life that were there for me.